I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to the Season 9 premiere of Old's Oscar Countdown. We are back. We are here going to be covering the 2025 Oscar season, your one-stop shop for all things awards this fall movie season. I'm so happy to be back. If you're just joining us once again for the Oscar season, welcome back. I'm glad you were able to come back. If you haven't checked out my previous series, More Than Kurosawa, that's what I've been doing during the summer months and exploring the wide world of Asian cinema. But that series is over. If you're a fan of that series and are now kind of jumping back with the Oscars, welcome. Essentially, what we're going to be doing for the next few months here are breaking down the award season. We are the only channel to do deep dives into individual categories, so we're going to be covering the Best Picture, but also the Best Acting races, but then also Best International Feature and VFX, and covering all of the different categories and giving in-depth analysis and long-form videos to each one of them. But we also like to do the fun stuff. We're going to predict, of course, what's going to get nominated and then win at the Oscars, but then also cover the Golden Globes and SAG and Critics' Choice and kind of all the telltale signs that we can get along the way. This won't be my final best predictions video, of course. There's still many months to go. I will update this video once again in January, and then of course right before the Oscar nominations do one full video where I give all of my final predictions. Like I said, this is season 9. We've been doing this for 8 years now. Consistent year-over-year accurate results. You can go back and see top 10, top 5% on Gold Derby. Really fantastic stuff. But ultimately this channel and this series is here to help you make your own predictions. I kind of give my thoughts and the statistics and the numbers and the 9 years or 8 years, 9 seasons of Oscar analysis and making predictions and kind of some of my gut instincts to help you make your own predictions and help you do as well as you possibly can with the Oscar predictions. I have a blast with doing this series. This is the flagship series on this channel. So if you do like this video, please do like it. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss videos. We're going to be pretty much guaranteed Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. There's always going to be a new video. But because, this is going to be a really intense year, there's going to be multiple videos a week sometimes when we're talking about reactions and predictions. So it's definitely an intensive Oscar season. So I recommend you subscribe to the channel. But just a couple things I want to start off at the beginning of this episode is to say that for all these episodes, when I cover Best Actress next week or when we eventually cover international film, my predictions are almost always ranked in order of their likelihood to get nominated. These aren't my final predictions as to what's going to win. Right now, we're just worried about what's going to get nominated and the likelihood of that. So I want to keep that up top. I also want to keep up top that this year was a really great year for me seeing a lot of these movies. I had the privilege to go to TIFF this year, was able to see a lot of these movies, so that gave me a lot of insight into what's going to get nominated. And I guess finally, before we jump into things, want to remind you that we have timestamps in the description below for pretty much every video in which you'll be able to jump around and hear my predictions. So you may not be listening to this huge long introduction part, but I just wanted to get that out of the way before we jump into my predictions for the 2025 Best Picture category at the Academy Awards. So starting off with my first slot, I'm going to predict Anora to get nominated for Best Picture. Now, I have seen this movie, had the privilege of seeing it at TIFF. It is a very entertaining movie. The crowd really loved it, and that seems to be the case for a lot of people who have seen it, whether it be, at Cannes and it's winning the Palme d'Or, or at TIFF where it's a People's Choice runner-up. It is one of the most universally acclaimed, critically acclaimed, but also audience, I think, well-received movies of the year. Very easy to enjoy, very entertaining, very funny at times, but with some serious, moments as well and some dramatic stakes. I think I have it in the number 1 spot here because I'm pretty confident that it will get nominated for Best Picture, but I also think it has one of the easiest paths to win Best Picture, and I could very easily see it winning Best Picture. So first of all, in terms of getting nominated, like I said, it won the Palme d'Or. 3 of the last 4 Palme d'Or winners got nominated for Best Picture. Also, when you're talking about Best Picture winners or even nominees, you have to almost look at the 2 branches of the Academy, the international branch and the American branch, because in the past 5 years, the Academy really expanded internationally, and we're seeing a lot of those efforts show up in types of movies that get nominated every single year, which is why, Palme d'Or winners in the past weren't even considered for the Oscars, and now almost every year they're getting nominated. So Sean Baker is an American filmmaker who has that support of the kind of American branch, but then also, like I said, it played at Cannes. There's some Russian speakers in this movie. There's lots of Russian in this movie, so I think there's going to be an appeal to the more European filmmakers who have always liked Baker's work. He played Red Rocket at Cannes, for example. So he has kind of support from both wings and branches of the Academy. And then in terms of a win, what we always like to look at is the path to win. And the path here is very clear. Sean Baker, I think, is a frontrunner to win for Best Director. 4 out of the last 5 Best Picture winners also won Best Director. So there's a very kind of clear overlap there. Also, I think Mikey Madison is the frontrunner to win Best Lead Actress. 4 out of the last 5 Best Picture winners also won an acting award. So you need an acting win. You probably need the directing win. So that helps that movie there. And then 3 out of the last 5 Best Picture winners also won a screenplay prize. And I think Anora is the frontrunner to win for Best Original Screenplay. So it's got a lot of the underlying statistics going for it. Like I said, I've seen the movie. I'm not super confident it's guaranteed going to win just because it has a little bit of a more depressing ending. It's not as uplifting necessarily as some other Best Picture winners. That being said, it's got a clear path to win, I think, as the race stands right now. It's got Neon behind it, who has, have won for Parasite in the past. So there is, a lot of a proven distributor in terms of winning Best Picture. And I think that this may just be a coming out party for someone like a Sean Baker. So a very entertaining, well-liked movie, one of the most well-liked movies of the year that's got all this kind of festival buzz. You can kind of pencil in Anora to get nominated for Best Picture. I'm very confident in that. Then my second prediction, I'm going to go with Conclave. Now, like I said at the top of the video, this is ranked in the likelihood that this will get nominated, and I'm very confident that this movie will get nominated, even though I don't think it has an amazing shot of winning Best Picture. But it does have a lot of things going for it. I think this is the old person movie of the year. And for as much as we talk about how much the international branch has influenced the Academy in recent years, this is still a group of largely old American liberal type voters in Hollywood, in LA. And this is a kind of movie that I think they will resonate with. I saw it at TIFF. It had a great kind of audience response, people laughing, people cheering, that kind of a thing. It is one of those types of movies. It is a very entertaining thriller drama that will appeal to a lot of different types of people, both internationally and the kind of American branch. But then, of course, it has a little bit of an air of prestige. So it's got these amazing actors, Isabel Rossellini and John Lithgow and Stanley Tucci and Ralph Fiennes, who have gotten 5 Oscar nominations total across all of them. You have Edward Berger, the director, who is, his last movie, All Quiet on the Western Front, won 4 Oscars. So there's a really entertaining, almost silly kind of a drama thriller, but it's got this air of prestige. So it's got the entertaining aspect, so it'll appeal to a lot of people, but it's still elevated enough to make it feel a little bit more sophisticated, like it's got a point. Of course, that's a hallowed institution. So there's an air of prestige to a really entertaining drama. And then you can look at the studio in which this is being distributed by Focus Features, who had Holdovers last year, Tar the year before that, Belfast the year before that. So there is a track record of this studio getting their movies nominated. And this is their big movie for the year, so they're going to be putting a lot of their efforts towards this movie in terms of getting it nominated. And in terms of that split between kind of American and international voters, you have a director like Edward Berger, who has the international support, as shown by his last movie, which was in German, All Quiet on the Western Front. But, he's making this movie, which is predominantly in English. He's being, definitely courted by Hollywood recently. He could be the next James Bond director. He could be director of a new Oceans movie. So he's got some Hollywood connections that he's made with this movie and even looking into the future. And then also that kind of international support, making European cinema really for the past, decade plus. This wasn't his second or third movie. He's been making movies for a long time. So he has kind of a foot in both worlds. Very entertaining drama with an air of prestige. It will definitely appeal to the Academy. Then in my third slot, I'm predicting Sing Sing to get nominated for Best Picture. And this is the movie that I am the most differing with amongst other Oscar prognosticators. in which I'm a big believer in it. I think a lot of people online, they haven't necessarily seen the movie because of its odd rollout, because it's not the new flashy thing. It didn't premiere at the fall film festivals this year. It premiered last year. So there's kind of in a weird no man's zone. And as someone who has seen the movie, and someone who's been doing this now for 8 years, this is a classic kind of a movie that the Oscars will appreciate and will love. As a matter of fact, if I were to make a prediction right now, put my money on a movie that were to win Best Picture today, it would be Sing Sing. Because it is the classic kind of example of a movie that is entertaining and funny and enjoyable, but still a serious enough drama with some strong political statements on its mind that will appeal to the kind of traditional Academy voter. We also like to talk about paths, like with Anora. Well, Sing Sing has actually the most traditional path to win Best Picture, which is, I think, it is the frontrunner to win for Best Adapted Screenplay. I also think Clarence Macklin could be the frontrunner to win for Best Supporting Actor. So if it wins for Supporting Actor, if it wins for Screenplay, it could very easily win Best Picture as well. Think of movies like Coda, think of movies like Green Book. Even though those movies didn't have their director nominated, they still won Best Picture. That's the path that Sing Sing could be on. I think A24, I'm not exactly sure what they're going to do with this movie, because they also have The Brutalist, which a lot of people think can maybe win Best Picture. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But for me, I think if A24 really decides to push this movie, if they want to kind of devote the necessary resources to it, it could be a movie that wins Best Picture in that Green Book, in that Coda fashion of more and more people seeing it, more and more people really enjoying it. It wins Best Ensemble at SAG, and then Screenplay, and then Clarence Macklin is the frontrunner, and the next thing you know, it's winning Best Picture. It's got a clear path to win for Best Picture. I've seen the movie. It's very enjoyable, very entertaining, but also very emotional, and has some political statements and something to say on its mind as well. So while I don't think this is a big directorial achievement and Greg Cuidar necessarily is going to get nominated for Best Picture, I do think it is a classic Oscar movie and should be considered a serious contender to win Best Picture. I definitely think it's going to get nominated, barring, let's say, A24 completely abandoning the movie and not doing any campaigning and just putting all their focus towards The Brutalist. That could definitely happen, but I think if they play their cards right and if they push this movie, this could definitely be their next Best Picture winner. Then in my fourth slot, I went with Emilia Pérez for the very simple reasoning that A, for the past 5 years in a row, we've had at least one movie not in the English language nominated for Best Picture. And 2, for the past 6 years in a row, we've had a movie distributed by Netflix get nominated for Best Picture. Even in years like 2022, where we weren't sure if it was going to be, Glass Onion or Bardo, what's going to be the Netflix movie of the year, it ends up being All Quiet on the Western Front. Every year they have at least one movie that gets nominated for Best Picture. Sometimes two. So just based on those two facts, Emilia Pérez is the kind of fall film festival favorite in terms of a movie not in the English language. It's got a lot of acting support. I have seen this movie. Plays very well, entertaining like a Sing Sing, a little bit more directorially ambitious in how many stories it's kind of juggling. I think Jacques Audiard could very easily get nominated for Best Director. This is a director, acting, screenplay kind of a movie, but it's got the support of Netflix, which is, I think this is their big Oscar movie for the year. It's got a great ensemble, great acting in terms of multiple nominations. This may have been a movie that was too weird a few years ago, but not anymore. I'm betting on Netflix. I'm betting on the content of the movie, which plays well, which is entertaining and exciting, but also, like I said, politically, got a bit of a political statement there as well. And then the third thing just being international movies. At least one gets nominated every single year. And when I was looking at my lineup, I said I have to include at least one of them. Emilia Pérez definitely had to slot in there. Then in my sixth slot, I went with Dune Part 2. Because when we look at the list of top 10 movies, we have to consider different types of movies. There's always at least one international movie for the past 5 years. There's almost always now a blockbuster. The reason why they expanded from 5 to 10 was to include blockbusters like Dark Knight, which didn't get nominated back in 2008. And we've seen lots of blockbusters get nominated. Avatar and Top Gun, or Bohemian Rhapsody and Black Panther. Almost every year there's usually a couple of movies that are kind of blockbuster type movies that get nominated for Best Picture. Right now I only have one in my lineup, but there should be at least one, and I think this year it will be Dune 2. Let's not forget the first Dune won 6 Oscars, I think a lot of people forget about that. That's La La Land status. That's more than All Quiet on the Western Front. That's like Mad Max Fury Road. It was a very well-respected movie within the Academy. This movie, coming a couple of years later, is arguably better than the first movie, more well-acclaimed, very unique, very interesting, has that level of prestige and kind of art house and just how dynamic it is cinematically, but then is still a mainstream kind of a blockbuster that did well at the box office, sci-fi kind of a movie. Definitely think this is going to get nominated in a lot of technical categories and definitely for Best Picture. Then my next selection here is going to be The Brutalist, which may be a little bit too low for some of the fanboys online for this movie. That being said, I think a lot of people are projecting onto this movie. The truth of the matter is, not a lot of people have seen this movie. Played at Venice, played only a couple showings at TIFF. A lot of people are talking about this movie even though they haven't seen it. Well, who has seen it? I have. I saw it at TIFF, had that privilege, and I really enjoyed the movie. I think it could be even in my top 10 of the year. That being said, I'm not convinced that this is a really strong Oscar movie. I think the first half is like the great first half of any other great epic, like a Lawrence of Arabia or an Oppenheimer. It's propelling, it's entertaining, it's visually interesting. We're on this kind of a journey. We're very kind of engaged. And then the second half of the movie, after the intermission, is much more European. It turns into essentially an art house movie. I think The Brutalist may just be a little bit too prickly to be a serious Best Picture contender. I still believe it as a movie that's getting nominated for Best Picture. I think Brady Corbett could potentially even win for Best Director. I think Felicity Jones, Guy Pearce, Adrian Brody, I think they'll all get nominated. This is definitely an Oscar movie that could get, 10 nominations. But it's also, I think, important to note why I have it so low down here. It is a prickly movie. It is a more challenging movie than past Oscar winners that have clear emotional arcs like an Oppenheimer or Everything Everywhere All at Once or The Shape of Water or Coda. This is much more of a challenging movie. It's much more of a Power of the Dog than it is a Coda, much more of a zone of interest than it is an Oppenheimer. In that, it's just a little bit emotionally cold at times, a little bit mysterious, hard to really connect to. In particular, that second half, I think it turns more so into a traditional Brady Corbett movie in which the Academy hasn't appreciated in the past. So it's an incredible achievement. It's a great movie. I recommend you guys definitely check it out. But is it an Oscar movie? I'm less convinced than other people. I don't think it could potentially win for Best Picture. And it has a potential path, maybe in an acting win, maybe director. But, I have Corbett maybe in the 2-3 slot. I have Adrian Brody in the kind of 3 slot in actor. Maybe a Guy Pearce for supporting actor. But right now, I think it's, as someone who has seen it, may just be a little bit too prickly of a movie. More of a movie that you respect than you necessarily love. And I don't think it'll have the widespread support that a movie like Anora or maybe even Sing Sing, I think, definitely will. Then in my 7th slot, I'm going to go with Blitz. This is the latest film from Steve McQueen. No one has seen the movie. People will see it on the 14th here of October at the New York Film Festival. But I'm still including it in my predictions right now based on pedigree. His last film, 2018's Widows, we knew wasn't going to get nominated for Best Picture, much more of a genre film. But then his movie before that was 12 Years a Slave, which won Best Picture. So if we're going to bet on a period piece Steve McQueen movie to get nominated for Best Picture after his last period piece movie actually won Best Picture, I think that's a good shot. Also has some strong talent behind it in the case of Saoirse Ronan, who's been nominated many times. She's an Oscar darling, so it helps that she's in this movie in terms of it getting seen. It's still playing the festivals, so we expect it to be a certain level of quality. And then also, I'm betting on Apple, which last year got Killers of the Flower Moon nominated. A couple years before that, had Coda win Best Picture. So they are a movie studio that will push their movies and will support them in terms of awards contenders, and this is their big movie for the year. So I'm betting on Apple supporting this movie heavily. I'm betting that if this is a high quality movie that will resonate and play well at the fall film festivals here. But it's still a movie that we haven't seen yet, so can't guarantee it's going to get nominated, which is why it's maybe a little bit lower here on the list. Then in my 8th slot, I'm going to go with a complete unknown. which is, like Blitz, a complete unknown. No one's seen this movie, and it's another movie that we're projecting upon in terms of thinking it will be a type of movie that gets nominated for Best Picture, because it really has a lot going for it. It really does check a lot of boxes. The first one is being distributed by Searchlight Pictures. And Searchlight, I don't know a year where they didn't get a movie nominated for Best Picture. Whether it be Three Billboards in the Shape of Water, back in 2017, or Poor Things last year, they almost always get nominated. Sometimes they have multiple movies a year get nominated. It's that kind of a studio. They know what they're doing. So the fact that this movie was shooting earlier in the year and they decided to expedite the post-production of this movie to make sure that it comes out this year indicates to me that they have a strong confidence in this movie as an Oscar movie. They wouldn't rush this movie if they didn't think it was very good. I trust their taste, and their taste is, a strong barometer, because they usually get at least one of their movies nominated every single year. So I trust their taste, and I trust their ability to push it as an Oscar movie. That helps. The second thing, the filmmaker James Mangold made Ford v Ferrari a couple of years ago, made Girl Interrupted in the 90s. He has proven himself to be an Oscar filmmaker many times before in terms of acting nominations, but also in the case of something like Ford v Ferrari, Best Picture. So I believe in the filmmaker and his ability to deliver a quality film. And then I believe in the trust of Searchlight that thinks this is a quality film, looking at some of the dailies that they decided to rush this to make sure that it gets done by the end of the year. And then the content of the film itself. It is a music biopic. Maestro was a music biopic last year. It got nominated. The year before that, Elvis was a music biopic. It got nominated. A couple of years before that, Bohemian Rhapsody, same thing, music biopic, got nominated. And then even just in general, biopics, even last year, Oppenheimer won Best Picture as a biopic. The Academy loves biopics, in particular music biopics. There isn't really a biopic this year of my lineup. You could say technically something like Sing Sing, but they're not famous people in the case of something like J. Robert Oppenheimer or Elvis or Leonard Bernstein. Bob Dylan is famous like those other names. So they love the biopic. If this movie's any good, like Searchlight indicates it is, like the filmmaker's past pedigree indicates that it is, this is kind of catnip for the Academy. And the final thing I want to mention here as well is that this is going to be a Christmas release, where usually almost all the movies that get nominated are premiered at kind of fall film festivals or Cannes. There's usually maybe one Sundance movie, but there's usually almost always one Christmas movie, which is a movie that releases at Christmas in December at the end of the year that gets nominated, in part because we saw all the great movies in September, but now we have another great movie in December. It's shiny, it's new, it's interesting, it's the latest thing we watched, and people kind of get the buzz off of that and oftentimes nominate those movies. Think of Vice in 2018, think of Don't Look Up in 2021, think of 1917, think of Avatar: The Way of Water. There's almost always a kind of movie that's released late in the year, usually in December, right before Oscar voting, that wows voters, that has that kind of buzz and that hype, and that gets it enough to get at least a Best Picture nomination or some other Oscar nominations. Then in my 9th slot, I'm going to go with A Real Pain. This was another movie that was tough to predict because I haven't seen this movie. That being said, what I read on about it and its kind of pedigree does position it well to get nominated. Like a complete unknown, this is also being campaigned by Searchlight. They've gotten other movies, like I mentioned, multiple movies a year nominated for Best Picture, so I trust them as a distributor to put their support behind these kinds of movies. It may be left out in the case of something like a complete unknown, but maybe a complete unknown is a complete dud, and A Real Pain is a real Oscar movie. We don't know just yet. But what I decided to do when trying to decide these kind of final slots, the 8, the 9, the 10s, I look back on the types of movies that I didn't predict in past years, because we've been doing this now for 8 years. I've looked at the movies I didn't predict, that I got wrong on, and tried to find some similarities of those kinds of movies so we can avoid that mistake in the future. So I look back on the movies that I got wrong in past years that got nominated in those, let's call them, 9, 10 type slots for the Oscars. 2017 didn't predict Darkest Hour or Phantom Thread. 21 didn't predict Judas and the Black Messiah. 22 didn't predict Women Talking. And what's similar about all those movies is that they are above the line movies. They're not below the line movies. And to explain that, above the line is screenplay movies, acting movies, directing movies, not necessarily cinematography movies or visual effects or sound movies. If you think of a movie like Dunkirk, that's a movie that gets nominated for director and picture, no acting awards. I don't even know if it got screenplay, and then a bunch of technical awards. But then a movie like Women Talking gets nominated for screenplay and then picture, or Darkest Hour gets a bunch of acting nominations and then picture. It's usually these above-the-line types of movies that get nominated that maybe I miss out on, or that usually get in those 8-9 slots. Drive My Car being kind of another example. And when we look at a movie like A Real Pain, that is that kind of a movie. It's not a below-the-line movie. It is a movie that I think will get nominated for Best Original Screenplay, definitely. I think it will definitely get nominated for Kieran Culkin for Best Supporting Actor. He could potentially even win in that category. So we already have the support there in terms of screenplay and acting. Now we have the support of something like Searchlight, and in these kind of 9-10 slots, I think A Real Pain can kind of sneak in there. Also important to note that it is a Sundance movie. If we look at the past years, 23 Past Lives premiered at Sundance, got nominated. 21 Coda premiered at Sundance, got nominated for Best Picture. 2020, we had Minari and Promising Young Woman. To me, A Real Pain fits in with those kinds of movies, Sundance-type movies that are entertaining and emotional, but maybe a little bit more on a smaller scale, work well on streamers, so they will not be a movie like Avatar that you have to see in theaters, that relies on people seeing it in theaters and then immediately voting for it. It is a movie that can kind of play and do well on streaming services and have people kind of catch up with the movie eventually further on into the season, and its power isn't lost by not watching it in a theater. I'm betting on the quality of the movie based on what I've read, which seems to be very high. I'm betting on the screenplay, the Kieran Culkin nomination, and the fact that these 9-10 movies are usually above-the-line types of movies, not below-the-line kinds of movies. And then in my final spot, I'm going to go with Nickel Boys. And this is a movie I haven't seen, but a lot of people have seen it, and I think it is one of the most critically acclaimed movies of the year. The critics love this movie. It is a huge achievement in many regards to a lot of people. Now, the people that have seen it kind of are weary that it is an Oscar movie, maybe a little bit too formally ambitious. That being said, I think if any group does acknowledge this movie, it would be the Academy. Listen, 5 years ago, the Academy probably wouldn't nominate this movie. They probably wouldn't nominate, though, Drive My Car or The Zone of Interest. The Academy is getting much more critically minded. They're much more willing to nominate the movies that, the New York Film Critics Society will nominate. Usually there was kind of a split between the Oscar bait type movies and the movies that the critics really like, the smaller, independent, foreign, more weird movies. Well, now those movies are getting represented at the Academy. So if Nickel Boys truly is one of the best movies of the year, and the Academy is becoming more and more critic-like, I think that will give them a strong likelihood of this movie getting nominated. If any group appreciates this, I don't think it's necessarily going to be Critics' Choice or SAG, but it would be the Academy. And like A Real Pain, it is also a movie that is an above-the-line movie. I think Ingenue Ellis-Taylor could get nominated for Best Supporting Actress based on the buzz we've heard from her so far. I think it will definitely get nominated for Best Screenplay. There is an outside chance of someone like a Ramel Ross getting in for Director, but I don't think he needs to. If it gets in for Supporting Actress, if it gets in for Screenplay, that makes it a serious contender for that kind of final slot here in Best Picture. Like I said, this may not be a Golden Globes type of a movie, but the Academy has become more strange, more esoteric in their selections. Zone of Interest is clearly an art house film. Drive My Car is a 3-hour-long Japanese movie. Like, they're becoming more and more interesting, I would say, with their Best Picture nominations. And if Nickel Boys really is one of the most acclaimed movies of the year, the sort of critics pick, well, then that definitely should be a consideration here for a nomination. Now, jumping into some possible contenders of movies that I think could get nominated, but I'm not predicting just yet. The first one being Gladiator II. I almost include this in my predictions, but it is more of a below-the-line type of movie. Maybe Denzel Washington, but I think it's more so a movie that's going to get nominated for sound and production design. And those types of movies, as we've explained, don't always slip into that final 10 slot. It's usually the above-the-line types of movies. Also, in the past couple of years, Napoleon and House of Gucci were potential Oscar Best Picture movies that ended up being kind of rejected by the Oscars, restricted just to the below-the-line type categories. That being said, we have had multiple blockbusters get nominated in recent years, and right now we only have one blockbuster in the case of Dune Part 2, so maybe this is a great fall blockbuster that surprises and gets nominated because it is like an Avatar, kind of the next new thing. I think it has a higher chance of a movie than like Wicked or The Wild Robot at being the fall blockbuster, mainstream type movie that sneaks in. But I am not confident that this is going to be a huge box office hit, which I think it would need to be a sensation to get nominated because everyone loves it so much. I think it'll be well respected, pretty good to great maybe, but not enough of a box office hit and not undeniable enough in the same way like a Dune 2 is to get nominated here for the Academy. And then my final possible contender, I'm going to go with The Seed of the Sacred Fig. This is an international film, Iranian film being submitted to the Oscars by Germany. I wanted to include it here because the past 2 years, we've had at least 2 movies not in the English language nominated for Best Picture. Of my lineup right now, we have Emilia Pérez. You could say Anora, but that's really an English film by an American filmmaker that has some Russian parts. So I wouldn't really include that. So if we were to include another international film, I think this would be the next kind of most obvious selection here. It is a little bit more challenging. It is a long movie. It is a kind of movie that they don't always recognize. But like I said, if they're going to recognize a movie like Drive My Car, this movie could get in, and it could follow a similar path to Drive My Car, and then it gets in for a director, international feature, and picture. But I think it's more likely scenario is that it's going to get nominated for screenplay, more of a worst person in the world type of a path, screenplay, international feature, and then that's it. That being said, if we're going to consider possible contenders, we have to consider an international film just because of, like I mentioned, the international branch of the Academy growing in numbers every single year. We have to consider more international movies, and this is one of the most critically acclaimed international movies of this year. But that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this long video breaking down the Best Picture contenders. Stay tuned to next week where we're going to be talking about the Best Actress category, and please let me know your predictions in the comments down below. But that's about it. Until next time, stay tuned.